Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of our My Hero Academia review podcast. If you didn't know, each and every week the two of us read through 2 volumes of the My Hero Academia manga, then sit down on this channel and review it. I am your host, Todi, that is my co-host, Zero, and this is Training Arc. If you're watching this as it goes up live on YouTube, then consider heading on over to patreon.com/KTOYT and pledging a couple bucks to get the next episode early. Of course, every episode we like to throw a question out there for you all to discuss. Last week we asked you, which character deserves a bigger spotlight? If you want to hear our answers, head on over to the previous episode. This week, had a pretty big fight. Little tussle with a guy named Fat Gum and Rappa. So, question this week is, excluding, I put teachers here by accident, excluding major villains, who has been your favorite villain thus far? We'll give you our answers at the end of the video. Let us know yours in the comment section below. Zero, hit us with a brief summary of the volumes read.
Alright, so at the end of last episode, Mirio and Deku had just bumped into Overhaul during their first patrol with the Night Eye internship.
Hold on, one quick clarification on the question of the week. I forgot to mention, what I mean by major villains is no Shigaraki, no All for One, no Stain, and who was the last one?
Overhaul. Yeah.
So outside of that, 4, everyone's on the table. All right, go ahead.
Right, so they bump into Overhaul, and they meet a young girl named Eri. They manage to avoid making it obvious that they're investigating him, but when they go to leave, Eri grabs Deku. Overhaul didn't catch on to them, because he thought they were just new, young, nervous heroes. But when they go to leave, Eri grabs Deku and begs him not to go. So Deku's like, "Sir, are you beating your daughter?" Mirio's just trying to leave. Overhaul lures them into the alley. Well, you've seen her, so I guess I gotta kill you now. Eri sort of runs back to his side when she realizes, oh shit, he's about to kill these kids. I should probably, I'll take the L, let them live, because she's such a nice, sweet girl.
Yeah.
Deku and Mirio, they get back to base with the investigation uncompromised and new information on Overhaul's supposed daughter.
Which I thought was weird that they just believed him, because I didn't. He was like, yes, this is my daughter. And Mirio was like, oh my god, he has a daughter. I would have been like, oh, he's lying. He just has this hostage kid. But sure, Mirio, whatever.
Yeah, definitely his actual daughter. I actually don't remember if she is. I guess we'll find out. Or we'll find out. But so Night Eye bullies Deku a little. He's like, yeah, you still suck, but I guess good job out there. And All Might tells Deku why he and Night Eye had a falling out after Deku interrogates him. And he explains that
just what we thought it was. It wasn't anything super new, but I guess it just confirmed that, yeah, Night Eye. Well, I guess new information was that All Might knows he's gonna die. So there's that.
All Might knows he's gonna die in a year, and Deku basically says, "Well, we're not gonna let that happen, right, All Might?" And All Might's like, "Yeah, totally." And after that, we go back to internships. Nejire, the girl from the Big Three, ends up one-shotting 2 giant types in one panel. So that was nice.
Yeah, cool character that we have. Pretty much it follows trend with Ochako, and that not a lot of spotlight. Starting to notice a pattern there maybe, but who knows?
Yeah, female characters, am I right? But we actually Suyu and Ochako get a joint super move, which I thought was pretty cool. Have we seen that before?
Not that I know of, but clarify this. How exactly is Suyu doing anything? Is she making the rocks? How? Does she doesn't have super strength or anything?
I think she's if I had to guess how this move actually worked, it would be like Ochako levitating rocks and Suyu like throwing them in the air with her tongue or whatever, and then just dropping them all. Which I don't know.
Seems that makes sense.
It seems like a really slow
setup. Yeah. I'm not sure about the logistics of that one, but in theory, I guess it's fine.
It's the only way to explain what we see them doing on the panel.
The way it was used does not say that this is how the move is designed, but I would imagine that a good way to like make this joint like combo work would be to think of it as a mobility move to allow Suyu to jump basically wherever she wants for like aerial combat. But that's not how this move was used at all, so I don't know.
That would be an interesting utilization, but it seems like they're just carpet bombing the enemy with this move, so whatever. We get a cool joint internship team up featuring Ryuku, Gravity, Froppy, Sun Eater, Red Riot, Fat Gum, Sir Night Eye, Deku, and Lemillion.
Which is, it's interesting that we have avenues for another cool meetup, like another cool team up, considering literally like 2 volumes ago, we just had one between some of the coolest heroes that we knew, and somehow we were able to have another one not including any of those heroes, like literally any of them. Even Gran Torino didn't show up. That's
true. Like I said, man, Horikoshi, he has no shortage of interesting characters that he wants to throw into the series.
Yeah.
I think I forgot Nejire, because they didn't give us her hero name, so I didn't write it.
Oh, good point.
So, Shigaraki meets with Overhaul in the Yakuza base, and he's sort of acting like he owns the place, and Overhaul's like, obviously his underlings are like, this guy's a fucking asshole, he's showing disrespect to our boss, but Overhaul's like, alright, well, let's hear him out. And he clearly has something Overhaul wants.
Which is a game of shogi. I just want to play a game.
And then we'll team up and kill all the heroes.
Yeah, unrelated to that.
First, let's play this board game. But we get to see Tamaki's quirk. He takes out a villain, flashes another food-based quirk like Sato from our class, and to some extent Momo. And Shigaraki reveals his knowledge of Overhaul's quirk-removing drugs, and Tamaki gets shot by a bullet that removes his quirk. Which
here's a question: do you ever feel like, now I'm not like this is not a leading question, I don't have an answer, but do you ever feel like the gimmicky aspect of how some of these quirks are kind of lowers drama? Because like, so I think about Tamaki's quirk, and it's used very well in my opinion in his fight that he got in this volume. And I think, the way it's done usually with like octopus arms seems to be a staple, and it seems pretty interesting. But the mere fact of how he gets his power is so gimmicky that, like, I don't know. Do you feel like that inherently lends itself to less drama and more comedy, or how do you feel about that?
I do think there's a sort of like unknowable aspect that like you don't really know what his powers are going to be because they're based off what he's eaten, and obviously we have no idea what most characters have eaten most of the time. But I don't know. I feel like it doesn't feel too comedically influenced. Like it didn't feel like Horikoshi made this quirk to be a joke, like Mineta.
Okay, I think you are right. Although that is an interesting point you made that I didn't even consider, was that it could lead to some serious, like, basically,
assholes.
Yeah, his power can be essentially whatever he needs it to be.
Yeah.
All right, interesting. I'll consider that for later. You were just talking about, or you were just recapping, the quirk pulling away thing, quirk removal.
Yeah, Tamaki got shot by the quirk-removing bullet. He's like, oh shit, they have those? And Kirishima gets shot, but the bullet just sort of bounces off him. And he like knocks the criminal over. The guy gives himself a Quirk strengthening drug and starts shooting like blades all over the place. But Kirishima uses his unbreakable and gauntlet moves, which basically just makes him really hard, and he walks up and punches the guy.
Yeah, you think, now this is important for later. You see this new move, and you're like, well, Kirishima is already like hard. Like now, clearly, he is just invincible. You'd think.
That's the thing. You're never invincible.
You would think he would be, though.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
We found out Overhaul is literally using Aries' flesh to make bullets. Probably due to whatever her quirk is. I don't even know how that works. Like,
I would imagine he just cuts some off and then builds it back, right?
Yeah, he probably does that, but how do you turn the flesh into a bullet?
Oh. Yeah, good point.
Future technology, whatever. We'll just accept it. But,
yeah.
And Night Eye's operation finally gets to raid the Yakuza headquarters, and a bunch of fights happen.
Yeah, a lot of cool fights. In fact, I'll just jump to this now. Let's conclude the summary, because I think, in our second episode of this entire show, we talked about necessary shonen tropes, or basically just our favorite shonen tropes. This is not a shonen trope, but it is a trope just in all of media, and I think it is my favorite. I think I am deciding it now. I've always had the suspicion, but I'm deciding it now that I don't have a name, but the group getting separated and having to fight their own battles is like my favorite trope. So this happens in Pokemon 3, the movie, the Sasuke retrieval arc, Soul Eater, and of course, the direct inspiration behind My Hero Academia. I don't know if you knew this. Sky High, the 2005 movie. It happens in all of these things. It's the moment where it's like, you guys go on ahead. I'll take care of this. And then one person stays behind. And it just leads to a bunch of 1v1s. And the group slowly dwindles from 5 to 4, 4 to 3. And then lead all to the one climactic fight at the end. It's just the best. Because it's always leads to character defining battles. It's never just it's never just the throwaway. Like in Naruto, this leads to Choji versus the other fat guy. I don't remember his name. And that is Choji's biggest fight in the entire show. And then you have Rock Lee versus Kimimaru, and then you have Neji versus the Spider Guy, which is probably the league. Oh, actually, Neji versus the Spider Guy is second to worst, and then Kiba versus the two dudes is probably the worst. But even then, they make up the I was gonna say they make up the worst by having the Sand Ninja come in, which was also a really, really cool moment, but they didn't do that for Neji. So maybe Neji is the worst. Either way, the point is, these are really, really cool battles almost always. So I'm going to, retroactively not answer the question technically because it's not shonen, but say this is my favorite trope ever, and I love it.
It is a
but
good one.
It does bring us to Tamaki versus the three gangsters. Tamaki, and as I said, these usually are character defining battles.
Actually, before that, there was Ryukyu's group versus the gangster outside, which happened off screen.
Yeah, big guy shows up, and then
there were only girls in that fight. So
yeah, who cares? I'm sure they'll cut away to the panel of them having won or something. I'm sure that'll happen. But so they get in, and the three gangsters. Tamaki has a character-defining moment after Mirio runs away, or not runs away, but runs forward without them because he is the only one who can with his quirk. He has a character-defining moment of saying you know what, I am always a little pussy-ass bitch, but for right now, I'm gonna pretend to not be one. And hey, isn't that the point? Isn't that the point of life?
Fake it till you make it, man.
And he does. He does make it. I mean, it's a surprisingly difficult battle considering these three are nameless goons.
Yeah, but strong nameless goons.
I will say, it's not one of the things I think is so crazy about where we are right now, and I do think this manga is getting fucking crazy. But one of the reasons behind this is it almost feels like we're in an entirely different story. Not in a bad way though, because it's like I think back on how we got here and how much has changed. Like so much has developed in like everyone's like personalities and power levels. Like think about the like first volume or first couple chapters we read where it was like Deku got kidnapped by a fucking slime monster and now we're invading a Yakuza headquarters with like multiple stealth op teams and it's like what is happening? You go back to even someone in this chapter or in one of these volumes said like they name dropped Stain and I was like yes, I remember those days. I remember Stain.
Good old times.
It's like Stain seems minor league compared to what we have now. And that's not like a comment on, because like I think, to compare to Naruto again, because that's pretty much what I do every single episode. In Naruto, there was like the stakes were raised, but it seemed very artificial. I mean, the stakes, sometimes it was fine. Like the jump from Naruto Shippuden from the first series, I thought was fine. But like the jump from the beginning of the second series to the Ninja War, I thought we got into an area of like, okay, now the stakes are being like artificially raised through like just arbitrarily granted power-ups, So and then at the end it just becomes crazy. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think right now things feel this danger feels very earned. Like the fights are playing out super intelligently. I think and that's what I'm getting at with this Tamaki thing is like, yes, these were 3 no-name goons, but the fact of the matter is they gave reasoning as to why these guys are very good, and they made them, in their really goodness, came from the fact that they just had, incredible synergy with their powers. It didn't.
Yeah.
They were each powerful on their own, sure, but also together they were super, super strong, which inherently is going to require the writer to be more intelligent with how they do it. And I think he was very intelligent with how he did it. And I think this was a really, really great fight that would probably be my favorite fight in the show, if not for the fact that that my favorite fight of the show is, or the manga is coming up right after it. So all in all, Tamaki, good job, dude. Love ya.
I think it's interesting. You say Stain felt like small potatoes. It took 3 UA kids to take him down versus Tamaki handling 3 villains who are at least comparable to Stain by himself. What a badass.
He's really strong. And I also think like I was a little worried when I got into that fight. Like I'm not really sure like I was unsure about how this fight could play out. Like I was personally unsure about, in terms of Tamaki's quirk is like, what is the sort of, how much room to play is there? Like, it sounds like there's a lot of room to play, but in theory, like in what we've seen, it only ends up being the octopus arms most of the time. So I was a little worried about like, is he basically just going to be, obstacle dude? And it did, I'm not going to say it blew my mind with some of the quirk usage, but it did get a little more complicated, like
it certainly got creative.
Yeah, like him having shell armor, being able to react in the instant before getting punched to like cover his face with the clam armor. I thought, hey, like that's pretty clever.
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of like Gara-san, the way he could just sort of put up the shield right on top of his skin really easily.
Can you clarify something for me? At the end of the fight, the way he beats the eating guy is that he knew the eating guy wouldn't want to eat his friend. So does that imply that Tamaki ate some of that guy's gem to use the gem as an attack, or was I misinterpreting what was happening?
He pushed the gem guy into the other guy.
Oh, okay. So I did misinterpret, but because
I thought that same thing happened, but I think what we saw was like his shells just sort of looking like gems.
All right. Well, that would have been cool, but it also would have been a little weird if he just ate gems off the floor. So I guess I
could just use those gems too. That would be interesting, but weird.
All right. What else is there? Oh. So I have written down right here that and this goes perfectly well with what we're just talking about right now. I did not expect the big 3 to be this relevant this fast. I mean, we were introduced to these guys literally like the last episode we recorded was like, and they've arrived. And right now we're already like, oh no, Tamaki's gonna die. Like Jesus Christ. Like I had a feeling
didn't waste time.
I figured it was just gonna be like serving as mentors for a little while. Like I knew they were obviously gonna get into fights later, just because I have like a rough concept of what happens in the manga going forward. But like I didn't realize, it's the same thing with the Kami Toga reveal that we had last episode, where I was like, I thought this was gonna be one thing, and then it was revealed the next chapter. That's basically the same thing that's happening here, except with Kami, I was a little disappointed with this one. I'm not disappointed at all. I'm actually, woo, I like it.
Yeah.
The big three is speeding on by.
I've noticed Horikoshi doesn't really like to drag things out, Like his arcs compared to like Naruto are a lot shorter, and like you said, when we have these reveals, or when we get these characters introduced, we're not always keeping them in the back pocket for like volumes at a time. Horikoshi, he'll just play those cards as soon as they're most effective.
But to me, that does lend a little bit of worry, right? Because it does inherently run the risk of like overplaying your hand too fast. Because if you're doing it as soon as they're ready, as soon as you can do it, then if your judgment's just off a little bit, then you're doing it way too early. Like because this was one of my complaints, if you remember at the beginning, was that when we got into the tournament arc and Ito was like starting to feel doubts about working with Deku, I thought that was a little unearned. I thought it seemed a little weird that he was already feeling doubts, and I thought maybe if more time had passed, that would have felt a little better. So it's not like this has never happened before, at least for me. So while this isn't happening right now, I could see it happening. Now, on the other hand, by doing this, he is making it so the story is very, very tight and like concise, which is obviously something I enjoy a lot, because I don't really, I really always talk about how people could cut things. So
yeah,
in a completed story with hindsight, I would praise a writer for having this quality. But because this is an ongoing story and there's still room to mess up, it does leave a little bit of worry inside of me.
Yeah, but I think Horikoshi is skilled enough to handle it pretty well for the most part, and I think he's demonstrated that in these chapters.
Yeah, I would agree. Do you think we're ready for a Nijiri fight, maybe?
I mean, look how long it's taken him to get to Momo.
My thought process is that with Tamaki, I said earlier when we had I think this was last week, but I might be wrong. We asked the question, which character deserves a bigger spotlight? And my answer was Shinso, because I felt like his character inherently had a sort of, he had innate story inside of him by being the sort of underdog. And in a sense, Tamaki also has that innate story where it's like, of course, starting at this low of a point, there's so much room to build on that, like, of course he could be instantly have the development of like growing some level of confidence. There wasn't a lot of groundwork needed as to where Nijiri, like, there's right now, if you were to guess, what is her character development? Like, where do we go for right now? Does, based on for what we've shown, the only thing that could change is that she becomes less talkative, but that's not well, why would we do that? Like, that doesn't have anything to do with anything. So because so little has been shown about her character, there is seemingly inherently like less storytelling to be had. Yeah,
there's less room to grow, but I think that applies a little bit to Mirio too, because he's such he's already sort of had an arc that we just sort of haven't seen. Whereas Tamaki's still sort of getting over his issues.
So what I would say about Mirio, and there's two aspects to this, is that Mirio is, one, I want to say that not every character needs to have an arc. I very much understand that. Don't worry, I'm not one of these fucking losers. But, obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that any character can like go without an arc. Some characters do need arcs. Not every single one, not every single story, but that doesn't necessarily mean fuck arcs, they don't matter. Now, with Mirio, I will say that, yes, it seems like he's already, with the whole quirk weaknesses, the way he was brought in was to be a character who's already gone through the shit. He's already done this. He's already come out the other end better. He's fully developed and ready to go. Now, obviously, there is still room to play there. I mean, you could already just knowing what I know, you could already see how this is gonna, and knowing what we both know, is just you can see how this can change a character. However,
Right.
there is still the role that a character can play outside of development, and that is like sort of not how they change, but how they change the world around them. So this is a common thing for Superman, is right. Like Superman is outside of like huge character changing stories, like I don't know. I can't think of one off the top of my head. What is more common with Superman are stories where it's like he is sort of used as like a plot device in which to explore other characters. And this doesn't sound like Superman, but when you think about it, it's like, to me, one of the most iconic Superman panels of all time is, there's a little girl who wants to jump off a building and kill herself, and Superman goes up and he talks to her and basically just talks to her all night and talks her down the ledge. Now, this is not. Yes, this tells us who Superman is, but really this tells us about who this little girl is. That's what the story is. It's about this little girl, and it just uses the framework of having Superman be this all good, type of person to unchanging, all good type of person to explore her story. This is where I could imagine a person like Mirio going, because they are so clearly, developed and all good. As for Najiri, like that. So like if we look at it as Tamaki is at 0%, Mirio is at 100%. Najiri is just a question mark. There is no. She's not completed, but she's not at 0 either. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we really don't know where she is in her arc, just because she hasn't gotten enough of the spotlight yet. But that can change.
Hypothetically, sure.
I am skeptical about it changing, especially because these characters are third years. So it sort of feels like this arc is really where we're going to see the most of them for a while. But
yeah, third years into and this isn't even like the beginning of the year. I mean, I don't know. I think we're already a semester down. Am I right?
I think so, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of time unless he comes, and there's nothing saying that these guys can't just come back. There are pro heroes in the show, so if they graduate and just become pro heroes, they could, still have an impact of sorts. In fact, I was actually wondering, do you feel like, academia is a strict word, but if we take it more in spirit as opposed to definition, do you think the show could continue outside of school under the guise of Deku is still learning, just now under an internship program as like a sidekick?
I do think we could go a Naruto Shippuden-esque route where it's like they change the name, academia is no longer such a huge focus, and it's like following the same characters as pro heroes. Or, I don't know, maybe there's a fucking hero college or some shit.
That would be a real... that would feel like the biggest money grab in the entire world. Is like,
that is true.
This college that nobody's mentioned.
Especially because we pretty much know that Mirio is going to be a pro hero next year. So it's it doesn't seem like normal for students to go to hero college.
That's the funny thing about the big three, is that they really are the big three. It's not just it's not like a linear ladder where it's you go from the best of your school to then the bottom of the pole on the pro hero society. It's no, they were the best of the school, and then when these three graduate, or at least two of them are just going to just be 1 and 2 probably. It's Mirio and Tamaki, where they are now, where their power levels at, they're constantly being told, yeah, this guy, Tamaki was Tamaki outranks or outpowers everyone here. And, if he just wasn't a little bitch about it, he could be running this shit, And Mirio is, people are, saying that Mirio is basically just number 1. He just can't be ranked. So, these guys are pretty strong.
Yeah, they're fucking powerhouses.
All right, you want to just head straight into, unless I'm missing anything, next thing is just the Kirishima fight. Does anything happen in between then?
I don't think so. There's little stuff.
There's some fuckery going on. It's basically they go into the hallway, and as they're chasing, Night Eye has the layout of the entire building. And I thought this was a clever way to subvert that, because that is one of the things I was worrying about, is that Night Eye, what we saw is that one, he's incredibly powerful. His quirk is just really, really strong, and the only limit on it was that he just didn't want to use it sometimes. And to me, that feels a little cop out. You know, like you could solve this entire issue if you just wanted to look, but you just don't want to. And like I get why you don't want to, but to me, it seems like artificial. You know, so I was a little worried, you know, as we went on, that Night Eye's powers were just going to be too strong. However, they had, you know, Night Eye had the full layout of the building, but one of the villain's quirks that they didn't know about, or they didn't know would be this powerful, was that they could basically just go into the ground and manipulate it to do whatever they want. So much like, are you familiar with Danny the Street?
No.
I could be getting his name wrong, but he's a Teen Titans character. No, I don't know if it's the newest run. I think this is a couple years ago, but he's basically just a living sentient street. It's not like a dude, to be different from this. It's not like a dude who goes into a street. It's just like his consciousness. You know, he has no human body. He's a street, and his consciousness can go from street to street. So he's always with you, but he's always a street.
Okay, I was really gonna ask, like, is he a particular street, or?
Yeah, he's a fan favorite, I'm sure.
About Night Eye's powers, they are pretty strong, but I think the drawback that he can only see one person's future for 24 hours is pretty good reason to not be spamming it.
Unless he just doesn't. I mean, because he could see. You know, he could see exact future for 24 hours or some stuff up to 10 years in the future. I mean, I don't even know if 10 years is the limit, but that's what we saw for All Might, 6 to 7 years. So, unless I'm misunderstanding his power, it's kind of just like he sees the future no matter what. And it's just, it gets a little fuzzy at the later he goes, but, only fuzzy in the sense that I don't know if it happens on the 6th or 7th year, but it does happen. He still sees it. He still definitely gets the full picture on that, just not quite the time right. So it definitely seems.
If he needs to see someone's future, but he can't because he already did it 16 hours ago, that's going to be kind of a bummer.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I understand. Wait, so he could literally only use his power once a day?
I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
Why the fuck did he waste it on Deku and the fucking signing the paper?
That's
just irresponsible. You're a pro hero.
He knew he was going to be in the office that day, so it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that seems like a pretty notable. In fact, that's too much. Take that weakness back.
I do think one person a day is kind of too much of. It's like when Kakashi used to only be able to do 3 Chidoris, and then in the ninja arc, Masashi Kishimoto is just that's not nearly enough Chidoris.
Yeah, because I mean, he's not a good fighter. So what purpose is he serving to the mission once he uses his power once?
He's a pretty good fighter. I mean, he managed.
That's
to
not what they
take
said.
Out, they did say. I mean, compared to All Might, he's not a very strong combatant, but that's not fair.
I would be surprised. No, I could be wrong, but I would be surprised if he's even as strong as Aizawa. So, I mean, I could be wrong, but that is the type of thing I was getting, is that he's not very good. He's
shown to have a decent physique, and he did take out twice his Rappa clone pretty easily.
Well, I will say we do get the fight in the next volume, so I could very quickly be proven wrong. The next 5 chapters that we read after this, because literally the teaser to the next chapter was his fight. So
yeah, we'll see.
I could be wrong here. All right, let's just jump. Oh, okay. So as I was saying, was that the quirk has the ability to fuck up all the rooms, pretty much negating Night Eye's foresight entirely. And in doing this, he's the guy's plan is to stall them, but once that stops working, he just basically gets desperate and wants to separate them. He tries to separate.
He tries to crush them first. Or did he separate or crush them first? I think he started trying to crush them, but when it didn't work, he started trying to separate them.
No, because I think he was still trying to crush them when Kirishima had already left. So it would have to be separate then crush.
Okay.
Whatever. I think it's not really that important. At some point, he tries to separate them, specifically Aizawa, because Aizawa is the only one there that if he because the guy, he can manipulate the ground and he is in the ground, but he has to be able to see. So he has to pop up every once in a while, meaning that if Aizawa sees him when he pops up, the quirk's gone, he's screwed, and, you know, he fucks up. So he wants to get rid of Aizawa. He opens up a hole in the wall, intends to push him through. Fat Gum jumps in the way, takes the hit for him, gets on the other side, realizes that Kirishima also did the same thing, and now they're both stuck there, which ended up being very fortuitous, because if either one of them just went alone, they would have
been really fucked.
So we get into what must be my favorite fight of the show so far. Now, the story so far. Now, I will preface this by reminding everyone that, again, I did not quite enjoy this series as much as I do now when we were, you know, in when I was still in the sort of anime, you know, coexisting realm. Now that I am manga only, I am starting to enjoy it a little bit more. So my scope of what my scope of what fights I actually enjoy is very small. So this one, you know, while it's my favorite and probably could be argued for favorites for a lot of people with a much higher scope than mine, that is the scope I'm with. So Kirishima and Fat Gum. Do we know Fat Gum from before this? I feel like I do, but I don't know why.
He may have like shown up, but this is definitely his most involved role in the story this far.
I love the dichotomy of like being Fat Gum, being like this, you know, you know, just like this. But then also he's like he totally gets fucking mad, you know. He's as like he spreads the array of emotions as much as any person does. It just does the entire thing while being a fucking marshmallow.
Yeah, he's just this big jolly boy.
All right, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so they get there, in comes, and they're basically just in this dark room. So I don't even know if it's a room. They're basically just in the ether, you know? And this punchy dude comes out, and he just fucking knocks one into them, and he just...
That's a very good description.
I forgot his name.
That was Rappa, I think.
Right, there we go. So he, which I think, does it means like boxing or something, or... It means it is just some word. Oh no, it's a ruffian. I think it means ruffian. I think. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so he comes in and he just fucking punches, and then I think they go for
really
a counter
hard.
punch. Yeah, he goes for a counter punch. Fat Gum does, and then there's a force field. Now we got shield. Now when I read the chapter name, or maybe this wasn't the chapter name, but it was like the chapter heading. It was shield and shield versus shield and shield and shield and spear. I was like, what the fuck is this title?
What is this saying to me?
Yeah, but now it all makes sense because Fat Gum, Kirishima, highly defensive, 2 shields, and then this guy has the ultimate pairing of he is all offense and the guy he's working with is all defense. So that in theory they should make a good team. In practice, this actually doesn't make. Oh well, realistically,
they do make a good team.
Well,
not good enough.
Kind of, because when the force field goes up, it doesn't leave room for Rappa to do anything, right? So it's sort of like it grants him a momentary break at best, but then what, you know?
Well, yeah, but I think because it's like someone backing him up, watching the fight, throwing up the shield when he needs it, it ends up being a pretty potent combination.
If I saw the shield as being a lot smaller and maneuverable, like if he could just throw up a fist-sized shield to block a fist like coming at Rappa, but Rappa was still able to fight, then I would agree that this is probably a lot better. But because the only reason we saw that the force field in use was as a giant dome, you know, that sort of left Rappa, you know, not being able to fight, I would just say this doesn't quite... This seems like a better idea in theory than it does in practice. Anyways, they start fighting, and basically, this guy, you know, you remember Kirishima's new unbreakable mode? Well, let me tell you, it's breakable. You know, one punch from this guy. And the craziest thing about this is, if you wrote this down, it would be like this. Kirishima has high defense, and we just gave him higher defense. But this guy, he just has higher attack, and like that sounds bullshit to me. You know, when you write that down, it's just like, what? This guy he's just stronger for whatever reason. He just is stronger. Why? What was the point? You know. However, you look at this guy, and this is the perfect melding of art and story. Is you just look at this guy, and yeah, you get it. This guy hits hard.
Yeah, this guy's a real powerhouse. He's just gonna blow through anyone.
Like, I look towards something. I compare him to Muscular, very similar powers in a sense, and
they hit you really hard.
I see Muscular as almost a failure in comparison. You know, I just think of, and because they actually, I mean, if you want to go even deeper, they actually pretty much have similar motivations too, except with Rappa, I just thought he was a lot cooler, and with Muscular, I thought this guy's a fucking lame-o. So, yeah, I would say, like, it makes me, because when I think about Muscular's design, it was actually kind of cool at the time, but thinking about it, it sort of seemed a little too, how should I phrase this? For my personal taste, it seemed a little too cartoonish. But when I look at this guy, there's this sort of raw grittiness of just like nothing but this, you know, sort of like 1/4 glove on. I don't know if I would call it like brass knuckles or anything, but like he just has this like that. He's just shirtless. Besides that, he's just really muscled, and you know that is the only thing he has. And then it lended itself to just, I don't know, really, really striking a chord with me that allowed me to forgive the sort of 1+1 notion of the fight. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What did you think about this fight? And Rappa, by extension.
Well, going back to the motivations for a sec, I thought the difference between Muscular and Rappa, first off, why Rappa's cooler is because he wants to fight like strong guys, whereas Muscular just wants to beat up little kids like a bitch. But in this, like, Rappa's here because he wants to fight a strong guy, whereas most of the other gangsters working with the Yakuza are here out of loyalty to, you know, the main boy Overhaul.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting how Overhaul has a similar relationship to his underlings that to like All for One's relationship with Shigaraki, where he's like the person who swooped in, saved this seemingly worthless kid, and like gave him a home, and in return they're like eternally grateful. It's because like All for One's from that bygone era where gangs like the Yakuza reigned supreme. I wonder if he like intentionally used their recruiting tactics, or if he just like sort of had the same idea.
I'm not sure, but on that note, the Yakuza note is there was an interesting thing here that we didn't talk about, was that there was some like underling mutiny going on. You know, a couple of them were like
bit,
yeah, some of them were like, you know, hey, we're loyal to the boss, not to Overhaul, because there is another guy. There was this guy who was like unconscious or just sleeping or something. This just older gentleman. So some of them there is a little bit of mutiny. And the interesting thing though is that Overhaul is under the impression that these guys don't know what they're talking about. Like, you know, they say that Overhaul is betraying the boss's ideals, but Overhaul says that I am the only one who's like observing his legacy. You know, I am the only one that's keeping in line. So I don't know what they're referring to right now. I'm sure it's going to get explored. But there is this interesting, you know, sort of gangster, like unwritten rules thing that's going on behind the scenes that I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that's definitely some interesting foreshadowing.
But anyways, to get back to the fights, this basically is, you know, it basically is just punch until you're not punched anymore. You know, like it just, but despite that, I do think it's a great fight, and that's because of the, you know, like I said earlier, when we get into this trope, it does lend ourselves to character defining moments, and oh my God, Kirishima, we get so much juicy backstory for this guy, and we just like recontextualize everything you thought you knew about this kid and realize that
Kirishima's backstory is so good.
It completely like. This is, so we were talking about earlier about Nijiri and how she's sort of a bit of a question mark. That is the same thing you could say about Kirishima, right? Like you could say, you know, what would be, so forget everything we know about his backstory going into this, or just, you know, take him at face value, and what is his character arc going to be? You know, is it just that, you know, he stops being less confident? You know, it's not like I would call him sexist or anything, you know, there's no room, like, yes, he's always pushing this manly agenda, which I guess you could say in some way is sexist, but it seems well meaning, you know, it's never like, I am a man, you are a woman, I am better. It's just like, let's just all be manly, you know? I never thought like he would look down on a woman. He would just also want them to be manly in a weird way. So it's not like there was some notable character flaw other than just being a little stupid. So there wasn't any innate character arc built into his character as far as we knew. However, this would be the way to do it, is like just recontextualize everything. And we learned that, you know, he actually isn't confident. You know, the thing we saw him do with Aizo, where he jumps in and that's the reason him and Facom are even here, like that is a trained thing that he has like learned to do. It is, unlike Deku, it is not something that he just, you know, innate inside of him that he always has to go save the day. It was like he knows the struggle of, and this is something I actually relate to a lot, is that he knows the struggle of, you know, being frozen in the headlights. You know, I could think of so many times in which I've seen someone struggling or seen someone who needed help and then just fucking, you know, panicked and like, oh shit, what do I do? Like, I remember in school once, you know, when we were doing plays, one of the people that worked on the plays was part of the autism program, and one time he just like, he was walking and he fell, and like I should have just helped him get back up. You know, it wasn't a big deal. He didn't like, it wasn't crazy. He just fell, and then eventually he stood back up. But he fell, and I just watched him, you know, lay there, and I just didn't do anything. I didn't say anything, and I felt so bad afterwards. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why didn't I just say, hey, are you okay? Like, hey, do you need a hand? But I didn't say anything. So like Kirishima seeing these two girls, you know, in danger, and then just fucking thinking I should do something, but not moving, like that struck a chord with me. I thought this backstory was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I like the motivation for Kirishima to be manly because he like obsessed over that image when he was too young to really grasp what it meant, especially in the context of his hero, but like came back after experiencing that failure to act and being moved by the words of his idols. It is pretty good stuff. Good stuff.
I would also like to say that this could, I'm not saying it will, but this could serve Mina really well, because, you know, what we learned is that
this ship. I love this ship.
What we learned is that he went to school with Mina, and that in moments of his inaction, she became the hero, and that was something, you know, she is very much like Deku in that sense, where she runs into the action
before she even thought about it, and after she was like, that was fucking terrifying.
Yeah, so this could, in theory, when we get back to outside of this arc and we're just back in the school, this could be an avenue to allow Mina back into the story through Kirishima. I don't necessarily know if that will happen, because it has not happened in the past in terms of like we haven't really gotten a lot of Mina so far, so I don't know if it will happen, but I hope it does.
Yeah.
Other thing about this fight is that despite the fact that I already loved Rappa, they decide, hey, how about you love him a little bit more? And they give us his backstory, which is but not a backstory per se, but it's just like, yeah, why I'm here? Well, I used to be in this fighting club and I was undefeated, and then basically in this fighting club, you know, you fight till you die, and I never died, and then this guy shows up and he killed me, and I was like, well, I want to fight him again. So he brought me back and killed me again, and brought me back and killed me again, and we're on round 5 right now, and I'm hoping that after I kill you guys, I can just go beat him up. I was like, yes, perfect. And that's like, I'm being, you know, joking about it, but I actually thought, like, the way this was drawn and, you know, the scene with Overhaul blowing him up, I actually thought like that was holy shit. Like that is actually really cool. You know, that is a really cool backstory, motivation. And then, of course, in line with that, in line with the idea of just a fair fight and wanting to get the best out of his opponents and still win anyways, you know, after quote unquote coming into a draw with Kirishima and Fat Gum, he says, you know, hey, you fix that boy up so we could fight. You know, like, I'm not gonna stop you. Just nurse each other back to health. And then we'll fight afterwards. And then he literally just, you know, sits around and waits. You know, Fat Gum is literally just bandaging up Kirishima. Kirishima's tired, and the entire time, Rappa's just standing over them both like, is he ready now? Is he ready now? Is he ready now?
I swear to God, this kid opens his eyes, I'm gonna pop him in the face.
I like this guy so much. Anything about this fight that you liked?
I really like the way this fight showcases the difference in ability between pros and 1A kids, who are already pretty impressive. But like Kirishima and Fat Gum both have defensive type quirks with strong offensive capabilities. So Fat Gum standing up to Rappa so long when he, like, after he broke Kirishima's unbreakable skin in like a second, demonstrates how strong Fat Gum is and how much room Kirishima has to grow.
Yeah. Actually, so one, I will say that Fat Gum, I was actually a little worried going into this fight, because I didn't expect it to play out so linearly. I was, you know, in my head trying to think of like, all right, how do they win this? How do they win this? And because it was at a point where it was just Fat Gum was like, I just have to keep taking these hits. There's no other option. I just have to fucking keep taking them because Kirishima's gonna die. And then I hit a moment where I was like, oh shit. Kirishima's gonna die. Like I didn't see a way out. I was like, there's no twist here. There's no I don't see what can happen to turn the tables. This is just they're just gonna both die. And for a second I was like, I thought this entire story was gonna change because like where, you know, there has been there have been consequences in the show. Let's just say, you know, like it hasn't been everything always returns to status quo. However, a student dying changes things, you know, like everything changes if Kirishima doesn't come out of this alive. And I panicked for a second. I was like, what's gonna happen? You know, like what the fuck? They just got into the dorms. No one wanted to even let them do this. And what happens if a student dies? And what is UA just shut down? You know, like what the fuck?
That would have been a fucking PR nightmare. First off,
but I will say, I couldn't figure out what the plot twist was, but I'll tell you what it was. But first, let me give you a list of some biggest plot twists in the series. I thought these are some cool stuff. You know, one, we have Shigaraki as Nana's grandson. For me, that was crazy. You know, I talked about this when we went over the fight a little bit, but I thought that was in concept one of the most genius moves in this entire show. Second, there's a mole in the UA. Now, technically, this one's still unexplored. There is room for a plot twist here. You know, the mole is like the setup, and then the plot twist payoff is going to come later. Right. Now, third one is pretty personal to me. The plot twist that Stain was still alive, because I did not know that. That was a pretty big plot twist. And then the fourth one, the big one for this fight, Fat Gum isn't fat. It is actually just hot. Like, super hot.
Yeah, more like fit gum, am I right?
Like I almost feel bad knowing that he's not fat, because that means like in order to be useful, he has to deny himself his hot body. You know, like, he knows that underneath he could just get so much pussy, but like I'm a hero.
I gotta be a hero.
Yeah,
literally lying on the sword.
And that plays into how Fat Gum won, which is that while I didn't anticipate this, it actually makes a lot of sense, is that his body was just able to absorb every single hit, and he just controlled the absorption and then redirected it back at them for one huge blow that destroys the force field and knocks them both out in the process. Or not knocks them out, but like takes them out of commission, basically.
Yeah, so, neither of them can continue to fight after.
That was a great fight, and unless you have anything left to say on it, I just have, not a question of the week, but I do have a question relating to this fight that people in the comments can answer as well if they want. Do you have anything left to say about this?
No, we covered everything.
All right. So I kind of wanted to just get your feel for, like, your favorite fight that is like kind of in line with this. So I'm thinking like Ida versus Stain, Ochako versus Bakugo, Momo versus Aizawa, and then this wasn't a like one-on-one fight, but I also put down Ayama in the provisional exams when he was like when he was about to sacrifice himself so that Ida could pass. Basically, what I'm thinking about is like fights where it's just like we take a character who hasn't received much spotlight and just fucking shine a light on them, you know, and they become someone new by the end of it. So Ida obviously had his whole brother situation that came to light with Stain. Ochako had the huge, you know, this is probably less, but it is like, this is where the parent issue and like needing money sort of came to the front line. And then Momo versus Aizawa was like the third attempt at this, but it was when Momo like got her confidence, and then Ayama very briefly, but we did get some stuff about like why he's a hero and all that. So I was wondering what your favorite of these fights were, and not limited to the ones I listed, if you could think of other ones.
Does the Deku Todoroki fight count?
It'll count for Todoroki if you want to say that, but it's a little grand scale in my opinion.
I don't know if that would be my answer,
because we're just kind of getting into the realm of like any fight counts at that point. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of. But I don't know. I think this Kirishima and Fit fight might actually be my answer, because it might be recency bias, but it was, like you said, a really unexpected twist, the reveal of Fit Gum, and yeah. I mean, the backstory and motivation we got for Kirishima really recontextualized his character. So
when I was
so much good stuff.
When I was reading the manga, the site I read has a comment section, and right underneath, the highest comment on that chapter was just, "Oh no, he's hot." Like, that's right. Oh no is right. I think I have to agree with you. I mean, I'm kind of spoiling my my answers for everything because of how much I've expressed. Yeah, but based on how much I enjoy this fight, I agree that, I guess by default, if this is going to be my favorite fight, then it also has to be my favorite of this subsection of fights. Good job, Kirishima. Big fan. I love this boy. All right. I wanted to bring back, before we go into the question of the week and general thoughts, I assume, unless you have more to talk about, I wanted to bring back responding to some comments. It does not have to be related to question of the week, because I grabbed one here that wasn't. Unless it was. I forget what the question was last week. But I just wanted to read this. I forgot to write down their name. Well, you'll recognize your comment if you left it. They say, "It is clear Todoroki never fully got over his feelings towards his father. Nothing is ever that easy, and Hori has been completely realistic in this measure. Inasa brought out the worst in him because he was dragging Shoto back to where he was before the sports festival. It made him realize he has unresolved feelings with his father. Right now, they exist on a level of tempered tolerance. I think the exploring of the Todoroki family is one of my favorite aspects of the series." Then that was point one. Point two is, beyond what it's doing for Shoto and Bakugo's characters, it's taking them out of the picture. This is in reference to me asking, like, what was the narrative repercussions of this happening? You know, like what narrative routes can be explored by having Todoroki and Bakugo fail these tests. Every student besides the class's heaviest hitters now has their temps. Other students can be a part of the upcoming arc, but Shoto and Bakugo are grounded. They can't take a part in the action. So to address the second point, that is true, but technically we have students who aren't grounded and just also aren't a part of this arc, you know? So there's nothing that would inherently bring these two with the story at hand. So it's true, but not
Endeavor
quite true.
And Best Jeanist aren't involved in this either, and those are the people they respectively interned with after the sports festival.
Yeah, and in theory, they could have gone somewhere else. You know, like in theory, Tamaki could have just taken Todoroki instead of Kirishima, in theory, but you know, he could have taken anyone. So nothing about that is like bound by law. However, Your first point, which is mostly just about Todoroki and his feelings towards his father and why you think this was a good idea to have Inasa and him come to conflict. How do you feel about that? About because we've talked about this before a little bit, and one of the points that we had made at one point was that it seemed like right after the Deku versus Todoroki fight, it seemed to be going in an interesting, realistic route that we don't usually see, which is that having one conversation is not going to save you. The fight with Deku really shined a light on an issue, but ultimately he still needed to do some inner searching to get where he wanted to be. And we thought, wow, that's so refreshing. That's not something that we see often. Except then the inner soul searching that he did was actually just like another page. So like in the end, it didn't actually play out all that different. So I was wondering if you feel like, do you feel like this translates at all? How are you, upon like another couple weeks to digest this, how are you feeling about what happened with Todoroki and Inasa?
I do agree with the sentiment this guy shares that the exploration of the Todoroki family is a really interesting subplot in the show for me. And I do think, he's going into heroism. His father is a very well-known hero who is also very controversial. So eventually we had to see him butting heads with some other heroes because of his relationship with his father, even though they're not actually friendly or anything.
I guess I would have just preferred if, like, I prefer characters changing out of their own agency, so I would have, like, the idea that Todoroki was fine in a perfectly fine mental state, and then Inasa came along and enraged him, and thus we had some correction, to me just rubs me the wrong way. As to where if for some reason, I don't have a scenario off the top of my head of how this could work, but if for some reason in the process of Todoroki denying his father and sort of trying to distance himself, he then created issues, and then those issues were expanded on and brought us to the same place where it was like, oh, I can't distance myself from my father, I have to just accept it. That would have, in my opinion, played this a little better in my head. And we still get the same outcome, but it's just brought on by Todoroki's actions, as to where the way it played out now was like, it was Todoroki's past actions which were no longer relevant. It was relevant to Inasa because Inasa doesn't have the full picture, but Todoroki didn't think that way anymore. So I guess just the lack of agency in Todoroki's hands just made me feel a little uncomfortable with the situation. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't know, because like we said, when we were at the Stain arc, we thought, if anything, Todoroki got over his problems a little too fast. So the fact that he's like, okay, well, I'm good now, but then further down the line, he realizes, wait, I still do have some issues about this. Even though it comes from someone else, I think the fact that it comes from someone else actually makes more sense, because he, like we said, he had already settled that in his own mind, but it wasn't actually resolved. So someone else needed to bring his attention to it again.
All right, fair enough. Well, this discussion can continue in the comment section below, as well as answering our 2 questions of the week. Technically just one, but I threw another one out there with the Kirishima fight. Do you have anything to say about any of the volumes we read before we just jump straight into that?
There was this moment in chapter 137 I wanted to comment on. Basically, right after Night Eyes explaining that Mirio will change how people look at the past when he becomes the new symbol of peace, referring to All Might's reign as #1 hero, and probably expecting Mirio's legacy to recontextualize what some would call All Might's fall from grace as All Might's inspiration for the next generation's next best hero. But the next line is, "This time we won't fail." And it seems like it's being said by Mirio and Deku out of conviction to save Eri, but the ambiguity that it could be the conclusion of Night Eye's internal monologue adds an interesting connotation in my mind, because it sort of seems like while All Might doesn't view his retirement as a complete failure because he's already inspired the next greatest hero in Deku. Night Eye, because he doesn't accept Deku, he's trying to, repeat All Might's formula, but this time we're gonna do it right.
That is interesting because to present a sort of interesting dynamic here is that he's not the only one that thinks All Might was a failure, but some of them are just looking at it. So what you're saying is that like Night Eye views this as a failure. Let's try again, but with Mirio. The police are looked at this as a failure, which we saw in I think right after the fight. We saw a couple panels about this. The police view the All Might situation as a failure, and in the future think they should just learn to rely less on one person. In fact, a couple other people, like a lot of people, are saying this, but I don't necessarily know. Like the principal said this. I don't necessarily know if the principal would have called All Might a failure, but the police definitely were viewing it in that. It was like a
failed experiment.
Yeah, so that definitely presents an interesting sort of dynamic where it's just like three things at odds, where it's like one side doesn't view it as a failure, one side views it as a failure for X reason, and the other side views it as a failure for Y reason. And I think the police have been underplayed in the story so far, and it's easy to forget that they are there. But if some sort of like high-ranking government officials became a part of the story, I would not be opposed to that.
I agree.
All right, let's just jump straight into the question of the week. Again, it is excluding major villains. Who has been your favorite villain thus far? Major villains being Shigaraki, All for One, Overhaul, and Stain. What do you got, Zero?
I mean, I love a lot of the villains that we've seen. And especially like Nomu, I think he's cool. Like I said in my carving a symbol video, like the anti-symbol of peace. That's a nice little thing. But I think my favorite would probably have to be he showed up during the he was in the Vanguard Action Squad. I forget what the arc was called, but basically he was part of the group that attacked all the kids in the forest. And yeah, it was our boy Moonfish. You remember Moonfish?
What was his power?
He was the one who was...
Was it the teeth?
Yeah, it was the teeth guy.
Why do you like the teeth?
It was just a really cool power, man. Like,
no, it's not.
Okay, it's not cool, but it is like strong and versatile. Well, maybe not versatile, but he uses it effectively, and I think that's pretty nice.
There was just a different version of that same power in these volumes, except instead of his teeth, it was just not his teeth. It was the one that Kirishima was fighting at first. So
yeah,
if we're gonna choose based on
sucked,
power,
though.
Yeah, but it wasn't teeth. So
he was an A-class hero or A-class villain. So maybe you shouldn't be so judgmental.
My answer, to the surprise of no one, it's got to be that boy Rappa. This guy throws head. And I think, in line with the conversation we had last time about like identifying my personal taste, I think it's very clear that at least one of my personal tastes is just throwing these fucking hands. Like,
yeah,
boxers. I just love them.
Boxers are cool. I mean, Rappa's power is basically just like cannonball jabs. So
yeah. And they're real strong. All right, that is our answer. I forgot to write down the fucking spiel I usually say. Those are our answers. Let us know yours in the comment section below. All right, let's move into general thoughts. What were your general thoughts on these two volumes? You like them? Think they're the best of all time? Because I certainly do.
I mean, it's kind of hard for me to disagree with that. Like, we're just ramping shit up. Oh, like continuously.
Yeah, I almost feel bad. Like I always feel bad about this being my answer because it feels like I'm just not being like critical. It feels like I'm just not trying hard enough. But I don't know, man. It just is. They are just getting better.
Because we're like getting further into like the operations of a hero, especially now that Deku is getting to be an intern and participate in these operations as opposed to just having to show up without permission.
It's great. So what are your what are your final conclusions? This is the best of the best?
I would say so. I think the introduction to Tamaki's abilities, as well as Nejire's showing, and all the Kirishima stuff. There's so much good stuff in these volumes. Definitely read them.
I'm excited to have this one be dethroned. I'm excited to see how the fuck they top Red Riot. You know, you telling me that this fucking Night Eye dude is gonna have a cooler fight? I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I know what I need to know. I will say that I like Night Eye a lot more than some people seem to like him. I don't know what the overall popular opinion is, but I will say that when I was reading the manga, the comment section on his introduction had a lot of like "fuck this guy," but I think that's just because My Hero Academia fans don't know how to separate like personal liking from like whether or not this is a good character. I think they just saw someone insult Deku and were like, no.
And now he's in the Mineta Club.
Yeah, so I don't know what the like critical opinion of this character is, but I will say I enjoy him, but I do not expect him to be as fucking cool as Red Riot in Fat Gum versus Rappa. So prove me wrong, bitch. Anything left to say?
I think we got it all.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Training Arc. If you're watching this on YouTube, head on over to patreon.com/KatoYT and consider pledging to get the next episode on Monday. Otherwise, we will see you in a week with the next 2 volumes of My Hero Academia.
Bye-bye.